Welcome everyone to Agile Talks by Agile Gurus. I'm your host Rahul Kataria, and today we have Anand Francis from Richmond, Virginia. Hey Anand,
Hey, hello everybody.
good. And we have Daniel Dina from London.
Hey, everybody.
And today our topic of discussion is measure and grow, and we're going to also add more like metrics discussions within that. It's not necessarily just safe related, but overall. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go down a list of questions you guys sent us earlier, and then if you guys have any other questions in the meantime, feel free to put in the chat column, and I'm gonna read out the questions as we get time. We do have a lot of questions, so we'll try to cover as much as we can. But in case if you have any other questions later on, just feel free to reach out to us after this podcast. All right. So I'm going to start with the first question, which is what is the measure and grow strategy as per SAFe, and what are some ways you would introduce it to a new organization? Daniel, let's start with you.
So the measure and growth strategy from SAFe is part of the business agility, assessments that, SAFe has actually recently released. They've done it in partnership with, I think, two new organizations, Comparative Agility and the Enterprise Business Agility Institute, which basically looks at, what does agility look like, from all aspects of your agile transformation, in the context of implementing SAFe.
Got you. Yeah. And then our next question kind of ties back to that is, how do you use Agile Metrics? When is the best time to use Agile Metrics, Daniel?
Well, I think it depends on, where you are in the organization. Some organizations, the best time to use Agile Metrics would actually be as a starting conversation, how you're looking to introduce agility and, to the different aspects of the organization, from the DevOps, the operational side of things, and also from the business side of things. Other times it could be also when your agile transformation is already in flight and you're now looking to assess to see whether or not, there are actually any, opportunities for improvements.
Got you. So, and Anand, I'm going to ask you this question. What do we do with the existing measurements like velocity, commit ratio, defects, builds, etc.?
Great question. So, kind of taking a step back with the measure and grow as a concept, it's sort of new to the SAFe, right? But I would like people to kind of look at this in a particular way, in that the measure and grow, it only makes sense if you have a place to go, like if you have some sort of a agile maturity in mind that you're moving towards, and then building metrics around that, right? And this is a common opportunity that we see in multiple transformations, is that your agile coach or your SPC or your consultants are pushing for one version of agile maturity, and then your leadership on the product side or business side is either hesitant to listen to them or don't understand why we have to do certain things. And then your software engineering leaders are not able to be in alignment with it. And then some of your scrum masters are for it, some people are against it. You have all this sort of miscommunication and misalignment because metrics is kind of a very delicate thing, right? Because whenever you measure something, people tend to feel very intimidated by it. Like nobody wants to be less, everybody wants to be more. If you put any sort of a red, green, yellow, that becomes also even more stress inducing, right? And so I always tell people that it honestly matters where you're going. If you realize where you're going, spend more time trying to realize what maturity looks like first. And then from that point on, we can figure out some no more than 5 or 6 key outcome metrics that help us chart our path towards that goal. And so that'll create a better holistic experience for everybody to move along those numbers. Now I'm ready to answer the actual question. So what do we do with existing metrics like velocity, commit versus complete, all the sort of the standard fare agile metrics. Um, it's kind of a complex question because we have to look at your scaled experience, right? Team level, or a team of teams or train level, then group of trains, portfolio level. So you have these sort of layers, and then the metrics change for each layer. And so I always tell people to really focus on the kind of foundational team level metrics, because if you don't have a repeatable, strong foundation, the train won't be able to perform really well. And if you don't have a good, consistent train performance, you won't be able to have a good, consistent portfolio experience. And so with metrics, I think to be short, uh, try to work on team and train level metrics first and get some level of consistency there before you start measuring things around the PI, or cycle time for the feature during grooming. Things much higher order. Wait on those, and work on the team level ones first, and kind of work your way into the higher order ones. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. Because I think when you start with the team level, at least you'll know, what's working for you with the metrics, what's not. And a very good point you brought up is define your success, define your point B, like where you're trying to get to before you just start doing all the metrics, right? So
Yeah.
that's a good point. Thank you, Anand, for that. Matrix always tend to be continuous and received with skepticism, fear. What advice will you recommend on how to approach facilitation of the adoption of Matrix, Daniel?
Yeah, so see, I'm wearing the battle scars. So I've been burned before by metrics. I would say first of all is to bring everyone into alignment as to understand exactly why we're using metrics, what they actually are meant to do. It's very important for people to understand that the metric based on an assessment, I do not use the word metric because metric is the output of the assessment. An assessment, which is the foundation and the fundamental of trying to get those metrics, are an input into understanding, ways in which we can improve, opportunities to identify the gaps in our agile transformation, as well
Right.
as also seeing, exactly if there are any disparities between what the vision is, as well as what the key objectives, the indicators and also the performance are, across different levels of your agile transformation. So you can have a transformation office that is actually driving those assessments, but oftentimes a scrum master would own the metrics and the assessments at the team level. An RTE, if you're actually doing safe, would own them at the program portfolio level, and then also, at the essential, at the, what do they call it, large solution safe, you would have the solution train engineer, but
Right.
could also have a transformation office, which also has a lean agile center of excellence to identify the opportunities and see exactly how we aligning all these key assessments, because some things would be systemic to a team and others would be likely unique across the team of teams, and some would be actually systemic across the entire organization.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely. And good point, Daniel. There are different people who facilitate different levels,
yeah,
and they should absolutely own it and make sure, as to both of your points, you know where we're going before doing, starting putting all the metrics together. We have a question, I guess, kind of related to that from our audience. Anna, do you want to take this question? I'm confused about agile metrics. I see metrics as an evaluation of performance for customer, what we are delivering, and for internal metrics, the how people perform against how they're measured.
Great question. I don't know who asked that, but fantastic question. Because there's different lensing to metrics, right? So the metrics, so like the person pointed out, there's one set of metrics, or there's lots of metrics around how we are performing, right? It doesn't necessarily mean we're producing any value. It just means that we are consistently doing something, right? That's valuable, right? But we still don't know if we're actually produced anything of value to the customer, right? So
Yeah.
we shouldn't confuse those two things, right? Just because writing stories is fantastic, having a consistent velocity is great, having an 85 to 90% commit versus complete ratio in your team is very good. Consistent PI planning, all this is very good and foundational. But and this is good. And as Scrum Masters, as delivery leads, as RTEs, your job is to create that consistency in your team and training level. But that does not mean that your customer is happy and they're getting everything they want from you,
Yeah.
right? And so the difference is the metrics also should be very clear to say those two different unique stories. So you should have metrics that basically cover the how you do agile,
Yeah.
and then you should have metrics, separate metrics on how your customers are reacting to it. For example, NPS score is a happiness index, sort of a industry level happiness index, and you should have a good healthy mix of NPS numbers from the customers, satisfaction surveys, right? So that's like an actual direct customer interaction. Then you should have some level of how well is the system stability, like your build versus merge, how many times you're backing out of the code, your defect ratios, uptime, downtime, latency. I mean, depending on your context of your business, the actual software, some of those metrics in there. And in addition to that, you should also have consistency in velocity, consistency in commit versus complete, how often is your roadmap, all of that should be part of your metrics dashboard. So it has to be holistic. It has to have a little bit of everybody's world in it. Otherwise, you might over correct on something, and you might be spending all your time trying to get everybody to do something a certain way, when that might not be the most important thing to be chasing after. Does that make sense? Hopefully I answer that question.
Yeah, yeah. And so are you suggesting we should have like multiple metrics? One, as you suggested, one is like more foundational, which kind of helps define the process or put a structure around the teams, right? Like commitment ratio, etc. So that way they have a good structure as a working, I guess, agreement. And a separate metrics to kind of measure the quality of the work or the happiness of the customer, so to speak. Is that what you were going for? Okay.
Can I chip in there, Anand?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you've got to mute Anand. But absolutely, you need to unmute Anand. Yeah, so absolutely. One of the key things I've seen from metrics also is that they're subjective. The subjective on the person who is actually helping facilitate and run those assessments, but also on the people who are actually inputting those assessments. For instance, you may have a dev team that goes ahead and score themselves 5/5 in CI/CD continuous integration, and then the ability to release on demand customer value. But then, really, from an assessment agility point of view, you may have a technical lead who will score 2/5 because he basically is looking at the fact that we aren't actually integrating every 2 weeks. We actually don't have a CI/CD pipeline. We've got to wait on timelines, So it all depends on the different levels of what the metric is meant. One of the ones that Anand spoke about, the NPS Net Promotion Score, is all about employee satisfaction. Remember, your customers are also internal and external. So are people happy doing the job for the external customer? Are they actually sizing the right features, the right epics, the right stories, and are they actually seeing values? Are the product managers also working directly to bring in some aspect of clarity in terms of elucidating and actually explaining what the future is meant to do, but also have a benchmark that guides the transformation to measure against and see whether or not there's any performance or improvements or opportunities for growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So Daniel, actually, let me ask you this question. How are these metrics different from the OKRs that were introduced in SAFe 5.0, or is that kind of similar?